Burlesque Queen, episode 307 of American Pickers, aired in March 2020. Viewers didn't know that it would be the last time they would see Frank Fritz, their beloved co-star who spent 20 years finding secret gems with Mike Wolfe. But let's play back the tape and really look more closely at this day that seemed normal, because trust me, what happened wasn't normal at all. You would think it was just another pick if you watched this show, right? Frank and Mike went to this dirty, empty port in Kansas City, Missouri to find history in a spot that most people would never even look at twice. But something wasn't right. Under all the jokes and small talk, there was a strange strain. People probably didn't pay much attention to it, but now that we look back, the signs were everywhere. The port was creepy, with boats that were falling apart in tall grass and rusty signs that were half buried in the ground. Frank was as focused as ever, focusing right away on things he knew would sell for a good profit. If you look carefully, you can see Frank moving a little and rubbing his back. He looks like he's in a little bit of pain. Most people who watched didn't notice, but Frank's health problems were already making things worse. He kept going in silence, acting like everything was okay, because that's how Frank was: tough, determined, and never one to give up or slow down. Frank started to make deals on an old Phillips 66 sign and a small classic Kawasaki motorbike. It was hard to get a good deal from the seller. This guy was tough, wouldn't give up, and pushed back hard. Frank, on the other hand, fought him tooth and nail and never let the price go too high. Frank finally closed the deal for $2,000 in cash. This is classic Frank Fritz, the great mediator. However, if you look closely at his face right now, you can see that he looks tired, even though his smile hides it. The hint was there, but what happened next makes it feel almost sad. The pick will keep going if you keep an eye on it. Frank finds this old Mercury outboard motor logo sign hidden deep in some junk, next to an old grandfather clock. Here he tries to get it for even less than $750 by pleading very skillfully. After the fact, fans wrote online about how smart and funny Frank was during this pick, just like he always was. But as you can see, his laughing was shorter and more forced, and he was breathing more heavily. Frank was still Frank, but he was having a hard time. There was something that none of us could see clearly at the time, but now it's painfully clear. Fans later wrote about how sad it made them to watch these last scenes again after Frank's death. Some viewers said the show was never the same after Frank stopped appearing in episodes later in season 21. Some people wrote that they missed his honest heart and simple sense of fun. One viewer even said they bought a black cat hat just because of Frank. It was a moving tribute to a star whose daily charm quietly moved millions of people. But let's go back even further, because what really shocked us in Frank's last episode wasn't just the scene itself, but everything that happened behind the scenes that we didn't see at the time. There had been no news about Frank quitting American Pickers. After that, Mike Wolfe kept going on alone in episodes, which made fans puzzled, angry, and finally very worried. There were many rumors going around about health problems, fights, and even claims of treachery. Now, if you really look at the show video from Frank's last choice, there's another sign that's being kept secret. Frank moved more slowly and stiffly, which were minor signs that he was in pain all the time. Don't forget that Frank had been open about his Crohn's disease for years. He rarely talked about his back problems, though. Afterward, fans who knew him well or followed his life online said that Frank was quietly having serious back problems that were made worse by years of lifting heavy antiques, squeezing through small barns, and bending over dirty garage floors. One fan who knew someone with similar back problems talked about how painful and constant the problem was, especially when they had to keep doing hard work. Frank kept shooting even though it hurt, pushing himself further every day, maybe too far. After he stopped showing up, people online started putting together the pieces that suggested Frank probably stopped showing up because he physically couldn't keep going. Mike Wolfe said quickly that Frank was having surgery on his back, but he didn't say much else. But there was another story going on behind the scenes that fans didn't want to believe was true. It was darker and more uncomfortable. There was stress in the air when Frank went missing. A feud had been building slowly for years. Frank Fritz and Mike Wolfe were great together. They were best friends on TV and could never be apart. Even though they seemed friendly and relaxed, there was a building tension that was just below the surface. To really understand what's going on, you need to go back even further, years before that last pick. Frank and Mike worked together to make American Pickers. They drove tens of thousands of miles in tiny vans going through people's old junk. But along one of the endless roads a crack appeared. Frank later said that he and Mike hadn't talked to each other directly in 2021, which was almost 2 years. Why? Frank felt alone because Mike never checked in on him while he was sick and in pain. Was this stress what people felt in that harbor when Frank's last show was on? Also, let me explain, things get worse. Frank thought that Mike wanted him to leave so that his brother Robbie Wolfe could take the lead. Was this fear or cold reality? Fans who didn't believe the stories at first couldn't help but change how they thought about old shows. Frank and Mike's small conversations felt tense all of a sudden. Now harmless jokes seemed mean and passive-aggressive. Fans fought bitterly online over who was to blame. Many strongly supported Frank, thinking he was betrayed and treated poorly. Let's go back to the scene, Frank's last choice. Fans who watched this episode again after he died pointed out uncomfortable times and odd silences that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Was Frank just tired from being in pain, or were these signs of a friendship slowly falling apart in real time, caught on camera forever? If you look closely, you can see that Frank briefly stood away from Mike and was watching him without laughing out loud. Was Frank pulling away because he already felt left out or betrayed? The things that fans said online about these last scenes were very sad. Many people wrote about how painful it was to watch Frank's last scene again because they could feel the sadness and loneliness he must have felt off screen. They were sad about the death of a great person, a real collector, and an ordinary guy whose charm seemed impossible to replace. Some people said that American Pickers was never the same after Frank left, that the magic went away with him. Even worse, Frank Fritz died 2 years after having a terrible stroke. His health was quickly getting worse and friends were shocked and sad, but it was this last choice, this normal day at a Kansas City dock that was falling apart, that scared people the most. At first glance it didn't seem dramatic or shocking, but beneath the jokes, deals, and normal small talk there was an ending that no one saw coming, a mute tragedy that was caught on film and will never be forgotten. But wait, there's more going on here than meets the eye. Let's take a step back for a moment. Frank's death did more than just break his fans' hearts. It also brought Mike Wolfe back into the public eye in a way that no one saw coming. Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz were co-hosts on TV, but they had been best friends since middle school. As kids without dads, they grew closer and were almost like brothers. But somewhere along the way, their friendship broke down in a way that fans didn't get. Things began to get messy around the year 2021. Frank slammed Mike in public, saying that he never reached out to him when Frank was having a hard time with a major back injury. Frank thought Mike was making American Pickers into his own one-man show, which made him feel left out and forgotten. Fans were shocked by what Frank said and they began to side with one side or the other. It looked like they would never be friends again. But here's the surprise that no one saw coming. Now we're in 2023 and Frank has a huge stroke. All of a sudden Mike Wolfe comes back into his life. Mike puts everything else on hold to be with Frank. Life as it really is, without any cameras, plots, or drama. It was hard for Frank to hold on when Mike found him in a hospital. All of Frank's mean words stopped coming out of nowhere. Mike no longer cared about getting hurt. He saw his friend in pain and wanted to hold on to them. After that, Mike started going to see Frank more often, quietly mending a relationship that everyone thought was broken beyond repair. Mike could see clearly now that Frank was having more problems than just health problems. He had been hiding an addiction for years and Mike knew this very well. Then the worst part happened. Frank's last moments were spent with Mike Wolfe right there with him. Mike gently put his hand on Frank's shoulder and rubbed his chest to make him feel loved and forgiven. Think about this for a moment. Two grown men, well-known TV stars, but in that quiet room they're just saying goodbye to old friends. Mike told Frank in a soft voice to find his mom, who Frank missed very much. This gave Frank peace as he took his last breaths, and Mike wasn't the only one there. Frank was with people who loved him very much, like Mike's mother and the best friend of Frank's late mother. Those quiet last moments took away all the stress that had built up over years of public fights. Fans who used to be mad at Mike saw him in a whole new way. They were amazed at how much love he showed when it meant the most. From a distance, it's easy to see how much Mike Wolfe had changed after this tragedy. He went from being portrayed as a selfish co-host who pushed Frank out to being a man who openly forgiven, supported, and soothed his friend during the worst times. Mike realized all of a sudden that Frank's mean words from 2021 didn't really come from Frank. They were the sounds of his pain and addiction. Mike put kindness over anger and forgiveness over pride, and he gave his people one last unforgettable moment of friendship. This part of the story makes me cry even more. After Frank's death, Mike said that he and Frank had spent a lot of time in the facility together, telling stories from their youth and clearing up any confusion they had had. There was nothing left out, nothing was left unfixed. Mike made sure Frank knew how much he cared about him and how much he was forgiven. But just when fans thought things were over, another shocking news came out, leaving everyone stunned. Also, let me explain this because it's messy, hard to understand, and shocking. In the days after Frank's death on September 30th, 2024, his last wishes caused a lot of trouble. Frank's father, Bill Fritz, even said that Frank's will was not real. Yes, fake. This might make you wonder what's going on. Is this just another sad plan by a star to get money, or is there something more sinister going on? Let me help you figure this out. Friends of Frank, the ones who helped him after his stroke, said he wrote a legal will in 2023, 8 months after being put under care. A judge even signed off on the will on October 18, 2024, according to court papers. Frank's dad, Bill Fritz, wasn't having any of it though. Bill quickly filed a shocking claim against Frank's in early 2025, asking that the whole why. Bill is sure that Frank never signed that will though. He said it was a clear fake and that Frank just wasn't able to make big choices anymore. After that, Bill's case got even stronger. He said that Frank only had him as a family member and loved one left. Bill said that Frank's friends and aides faked the will so they could get Frank's money. He was interested in everything, including the whole estate, all $6 million, Frank's valuable motorbike collection, Frank's cozy $155,000 Iowa home, and Frank's many rare antiques that he had collected over the years. Bill portrayed himself as a caring father figure. He even said that he and Frank used to enjoy family vacations and deep-sea fishing trips at Bill in St. Thomas. Frank's friends didn't believe him though. When they replied, they said Bill hadn't had much to do with Frank over the years. People who knew Frank well said that Bill hadn't even been to see him more than once since the stroke. Furthermore, it was said that Bill refused to step up and act as Frank's defender during his most difficult times. Bill showing up out of the blue and wanting everything made Frank's friends suspect. Why show up after Frank's death if you want full control of the estate? This may make you wonder who is telling the truth. Was Bill really the loving dad who caught up with his kids too late, or was this just a cruel way for him to get money after Frank's sudden death? Let's look into it more because there's more action going on behind the scenes. The lawyers for Bill made another strong case. They said Frank couldn't take care of himself at all after having a severe stroke in July 2022. They said he couldn't even feed himself, let alone make important legal choices like making a will. Bill was right about this and court papers showed it. The judges agreed that Frank was seriously disabled and even put him under a care order. This decision seemed to strongly back up Bill's claims, which raised a lot of red flags about the 2023 will. Wait a minute though, because Frank's friends quickly replied with their own shocking proof. They argued that Frank wasn't a helpless victim in his last years. They said he was still mentally alert enough to say what he wanted right up until almost the end. In fact, Frank's close friends said he was completely sane when he wrote and signed that controversial will over Memorial Day weekend in 2023. Even Mike Wolfe agreed with this, saying that Frank was fully awake and aware during their emotional meeting that same year, their first in 3 years. Things get even worse in this part of the case. Corey Gurley, Bill's lawyer, made shocking claims about Frank's friends, saying that the will wasn't even signed or witnessed correctly according to Iowa law. Gurley said he would show many legal reasons why the will wasn't valid, but Frank's closest friends and family who took care of him day and night fought back again, saying that the courts had already accepted the document, which made it clear that it was real. Let's take a moment to think about this, because this isn't just another court case about a famous person's money. Frank's friends were sure that Bill was trying to take Frank's property without his permission. They said Frank hadn't talked to his dad in almost 20 years as an adult. Indeed, it was made clear in court papers that Frank did not have any close ties with any blood relations. Frank's friends stepped up and became his chosen family, loving him deeply in a way that his own family never had. But Bill's lawyers strongly disagreed. They said that Frank's friends kept Bill away on purpose after the stroke so he couldn't talk to his own son. Bill said that these managers took advantage of Frank's loneliness to get him to turn against his real family. This situation quickly turned into a lot more than just money. There was a nasty fight over who loved Frank the most and knew him the best. Bill's plea asked for a hearing by a jury. Yes, there was a full-on public trial scene going on. This meant that Frank's last requests would be analyzed in public, revealing private medical records, conversations, and very private information. This broke the hearts of Frank's close friends. They were planning a touching celebration of his life because they wanted to remember Frank in a quiet and polite way. Instead, they had to deal with a court nightmare and fight in public just to honor Frank's last wishes. Fans couldn't do anything as this fight blew up in the news. Some people backed Bill because they thought he deserved to get back in touch with his son's heritage. Some people strongly supported Frank's loyal friends, sure that they had done everything they could to honor Frank's true wishes. But one thing was clear: Frank Fritz's death set off a storm that no one saw coming and made everyone ask questions they hadn't thought of before. Was Frank tricked, or did his friends help him when his family wouldn't? We're getting into more trouble as we go. Lawyers, courts, medical records, and million-dollar estates are all tumbling into each other over the memory of a simple antiques hunter who once charmed millions of people on TV. Let's not forget that the sad finish of Frank's story wasn't meant to involve lawsuits, accusations, or nasty family fights. It was a way to remember a life full of love, laughter, excitement, and special time spent with friends all over the United States. But now we're stuck in this court storm with family and friends at odds with each other. Fans are split, surprised, not sure. How did the peaceful death of a beloved TV star become a public show of greed and suspicion? And now for the hardest question: would Frank even recognize the mess that his legacy turned into? Or would he just shake his head and wonder how his simple life of collecting old things got so complicated? One thing is for sure: this sad finish isn't over yet. Fans are always shocked when Frank Fritz's story takes turns they didn't see coming, even after he's dead.